right, so today we're doing a special teaching because it is Hanukkah, the festival of dedication. So the teaching is called Hanukkah, the festival of dedication. And so what I want to talk about is this idea of dedication. By the way, if you did not know it, Hanukkah doesn't mean Jewish Christmas. Hanukkah doesn't mean oil or candles. Hanukkah means dedication. Because Hanukkah was about the rededicating of the temple after the Maccabees defeated the Greeks and threw them out. Okay? And this is around 160 to 165, whatever, in that range, before Yeshua. Okay? So so by the time Yeshua was doing his ministry, it's almost 200 years after the event, okay? Now, that being said, I want us to talk about why we're doing this. We're doing this because we choose to, because we understand the imagery of it. We understand the value of it. We don't do this because it's especially a modern day American version of it, which just turns it almost into like Christmas with presents and this and that. That is not what we do. And I think it's a shame that the Jewish community does that. And it's actually being endorsed by a lot of the higher up rabbis and stuff, which I have no idea why that is. Nobody gave presents for Hanukkah until the 1960s here in the States. That's where it started, okay? You want to know where I got that from? The Jewish Book of Why. There is actually a book like that. You go get it on Amazon, whatever, the Jewish Book of Why. And the questions was asked, why do people give presents on Hanukkah? And the answer is because the Jews in New York really started this in the 60s. I'm guessing to compete with Christmas, all right? But that's not what this was about. And some of you are thinking, well, do we need to do Hanukkah? Absolutely not. There's no scripture command to do it. The question is, should you be doing Hanukkah? Absolutely yes. Well, why? Well, because it's not only something that we do find in Scripture, and we don't have any negative about it. We see Yeshua in John 10, we're going to read this. On Hanukkah, he's sitting, where is he sitting? In the holy places. He's by the temple on Solomon's porch. Okay? Honoring that it is Hanukkah. And so we should be doing this because we should understand, okay, here, let's just go into this real quickly. Let's look at John 10. I'll explain to you why we should be doing this. John 10, verse 22. And at the time of Hanukkah came to be in Jerusalem, and it was winter. And Yeshua was walking in the set-apart place in the porch of Solomon. So he's at the place that is represented by the festival of Hanukkah being dedicated on Hanukkah. Don't you think it would be kind of odd to they just threw this in there otherwise? But they wanted you to know that on Hanukkah, he was thinking about what Hanukkah was about, and he was in the temple. He was at the set-apart place. This is part of what we see. So why do we do things? We imitate Yeshua. Well, I don't see him getting out a Chanukiah and lighting candles. No, you don't. The tradition of lighting candles, I think we're going to make some powerful metaphors for in a minute. You'll see, I think, has a lot of value. Okay, now, we also know that this is about not only the idea, right? The fact is the temple was cleansed out and dedicated. But then we also know that we're the temple. 1 Corinthians 6, 19. All right, 1 Corinthians 6, verses 19 and 20. It says, and do you not know that your body is the dwelling place of the set-apart Spirit who is in you, which you have from Elohim, and you are not your own, but you were bought with a price. Therefore esteem Elohim in your body and in your spirit, which are of Elohim. You're the dwelling place. The temple is basically the dwelling place. All right? And so here's sort of the imagery I want you to get out of this. So forget the legend for a minute about the oil. It was supposed to last for 1 day, and it lasts for 8 days, and all of this stuff. So you have an 8-day festival. And it was 8 days for a reason. Okay, it was 8 days because Sukkot was what they really wanted to do, but they missed it. They couldn't get it done in time. So now it's 2 months later, and they still want to do something, and they know they can't do Sukkot late because that would be breaking Torah. So they said, let's just celebrate how excited we are about dedicating the temple. Now, in dedicating a temple, let's look at the metaphors here. Not even the metaphors. Look at the reality of what they had to do, and let's see how that is a metaphor for us. So what did they have to do? They just kicked the Greeks out, and the place was an utter disaster. So what did they have to do? They had to clean it out, and they had to clean it up. Right? They had to clean it out and clean it up. And not only clean out stuff, but they had to cleanse it. They had to wash it and scrub it and make it clean again. So it's not enough just to get the clutter out of it and restore everything to where it will, as far as physically it might need to be, but they had to wash everything down and purify and clean everything. And in doing so, can we get the metaphor that when it was all a mess, we could look at it as being filled with darkness, right? The place was now in darkness, and as they cleaned it, they were bringing more and more light into the building. And so what happens when you light the Hanukkah each night? Well, 1 candle the first night, not too light, not too dark, but just a little bit of light. 2 candles the next night, then 3, then 4, then eventually 8 candles. With the Shamish, right, so it's 9 candles. That's a lot of light. You can light up a whole room. And so we're with the imagery here of the Hanukkah is that its light is growing brighter each day as more light is added and more darkness is removed. That's the metaphor I want you to have for you. As you're looking at you being dedicated, we're going to look at what dedicated is all about here in a second, but the idea that they had to clean out, basically the idea of cleaning house, you need a clean house, okay? And get all that junk out and then scrub it down and purify it and cleanse it. It's not enough just to clean out the junk. See, you guys may have stopped some of the behaviors, but you got to clean and wash off, and that's why we mikvah and other things. You have to literally and metaphorically clean and wash off all that filth, all that previous life, all that stuff has to get washed and cleansed, and not only just removed, but you got to wash it out and get it. So there's if you walk in a house, there's certain people that are this way. Some of them like mother-in-laws and that kind of thing, or wives who walk in a room and they're looking. They'll have that white glove almost, right? They're looking for that speck, for that dust. Why are you not doing that in yourself though? Because anything's still in there. It's almost like when they get cancer out of you, if they don't get it all, what's left could always metastasize and then grow. Okay, it's a cancer that you have to get it all out of you, right? How do you know if you got it all out? You got to examine yourself. And so more darkness comes out, more light comes in. Some of you got to understand though, some of that darkness is kind of trapped. And so you don't know that there's that much there until you uncover it. That can overwhelm you a little bit as that darkness starts flowing out and you're like, ah! Okay? It was always there though. You just had it buried and covered and locked up. But yet Abba's going to cause or allow you to go through what you need to go through to unlock that so it gets dealt with and gets removed and cleaned up. Now, you may not enjoy that. As a matter of fact, I promise you won't enjoy that. Because that darkness, please take this right, is you. It's not Hasatan. It's not a demon. It's the dark side of you, that flesh-desiring part of you. And that's what's hard to deal with because it's you rearing its head. There's a metaphor when we mikvah of burying the old man. I don't think we take that seriously enough. We are literally taking the old you and killing it. And the idea of burying it is it's not supposed to rise out of it. It's buried in the ground. It's dead and buried. It's a phrase we use, right? Oh, that thing is old, it's dead and buried. We shouldn't even be talking about it anymore. It's dead and buried. It's done. And so they had to clean this temple, and you are the temple. So I want you to get that imagery. So while we're going through lighting those candles, it's fun, we're lighting candles, and we're going to eat donuts and this other stuff. But are you focusing on what this is all about, which is dedication? So what does that mean? So dedication means to be devoted to a task or purpose, having single-minded loyalty or integrity exclusively allocated to or intended for a particular service or purpose. I'll say that again. It's to be devoted. Number one, to be devoted. What does devoted mean? When you're devoted to something, you obsess on it, you think about it, you love it, you're right? I mean, when you find somebody or something you're devoted to, it takes so much of you and your thoughts and your heart, right? That's what we call devotion. All right. So when you're devoted, to be dedicated is to be devoted to a task or purpose. So what's our task? Well, keeping the Torah is a task. What's the purpose? To become Him. Are you devoted to that? Are you dedicated to that? Do you have a single-minded loyalty and integrity towards that? I think we have divided minds often enough. I think there are divided loyalties. I think there are challenges with that, okay? I'm not sure why, but I think that there are. I think all of you have to dig in to figure out why for yourselves. Why is there divided loyalties there? Why is there a challenge in your integrity? Okay, and then it says exclusively allocated. Okay, so this devotion has to be exclusively allocated to or intended for a particular service or purpose. In other words, you can't give that devotion and that dedication to more than one thing. It's exclusive. This is what it means to get married, right? To have that dedication to that one person, and you have this exclusivity of loyalty, of integrity. All right, now, then I thought I'd look up the word commitment. And you know what part of the definition of commitment is? Being dedicated. So the commitment is the state or quality of being dedicated to someone or something. So if you're dedicated, connected with that is the idea of being committed to, having a commitment towards something, a commitment to something. This is not a game we play. If you play it like a game, then you're going to hear wah, 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 and lose, okay? It's not a game. This is a growth test chamber. We're in a big giant petri dish. Okay, and then we're being run like mice through the maze. We're doing everything that you can imagine that's to test us, to grow us, to prove us, etc. Challenge after challenge. All right, so you are the temple. That temple is dedicated. When they built the temple, wasn't it dedicated? And there was a commitment made that that temple would be a space for this and for that, and only these things exclusively in that building, et cetera, et cetera. And only certain people could go in, and only certain things could be done in it, et cetera. Isn't that the same with us? Okay? So what does dedication look like? What does dedication look like? Well, here are some areas I think that we could focus on our dedication. I'm going to get into some other things here in a second, but you know what? We're going to use the 5 major areas of life. Now, all right, those 5 areas. Okay, so we have our spiritual, vertical area, right? That's the major, most important thing is our spiritual and vertical connection. Okay, so what does dedication look like in that area? I'm going to hit this first. I probably don't even have to hit the other areas, but this is the most important one. What does it look like if you are dedicated? You're cleansing out this temple, adding light, etc. How do you do that in the spiritual vertical way? Well, you pray. Prayer life is important. You praise. Praise is important. You study. By the way, study doesn't necessarily mean you sitting with a book by yourself. It often means that you have a teacher guiding you through study, guided study. But are you studying? Because some of you think, well, I don't read the book myself very much anymore. I listen to teachings. Well, that's still studying. Okay? If you're actually actively listening to a teaching, not just passively listening, then you're studying. If you have your book open and you're looking up the verses the teacher's referring to, and you're making notes, and then you're studying. Okay? So prayer, study, praise, repentance. Are you dedicated to owning what you do? Fixing it when it needs to be fixed? Repenting. I mean, that's an expectation of an area of dedication in the spiritual vertical. What else is connected with the spiritual vertical? How about dedication to meeting together? The spiritual vertical expects us, we didn't even cover obedience, but the idea of meeting together. Are you dedicated and committed to showing up? We have Shabbat every week. You have the Moedim throughout the year, the feast days. How much of a priority do you put on those things? I've said this in the past, we should be Shabbat-centric. We should actually be Moedim or Chag-centric, which in other words, it's centered in the center of our lives where everything revolves around them, which means that we're aware of them. They don't sneak up on us. We plan for them. We prepare for them. We're not like, oh goodness, tomorrow's Passover. No, you should have known about that for months and been preparing. You don't need to get to like Friday afternoon and realize the sun's going down and Shabbat's about to start. You should know Shabbat's coming and be looking forward to it. Now, when it comes to dedication, does a dedicated person show up late? Okay. Does a dedicated person have excuses why they can't come? Or why they don't make it? Or why they're this or why they're that? Because if you're dedicated and committed, you get there early and you show up and you're predictably, what did I say at the beginning here? Is having a single-minded loyalty or integrity. Being late, does that show loyalty or integrity? Or just not showing up because you just felt tired that day? When people are dedicated to something, does tired matter? No. You don't come when you can't come. There should never be a won't come. Because you're dedicated. I mean, some of you think this is like church where you just showed up or you didn't show up or whatever, but that's because you didn't have a requirement of dedication. Are you dedicating your temple, your being? By the way, you owe this because it said in the next verse, you were bought with a price. He owns you. So it seems like it's the minimum is to show up and show up on time. And not only that, but show up ready. Where's the loyalty and integrity of the relationship? You show up and you're not dressed right. You're not prepared. You don't have your scriptures. You don't have whatever it is that you're supposed to have. What's the commitment level? What's the dedication level? See, you would do, this is going to sound interesting because it's going to actually play out in an interesting way. You would do so much more if there was a carrot just outside your reach and you do it and you know you get the carrot. Like if you had to show commitment and dedication to get a particular job or a promotion or a position on a team or some other thing, you would go above and beyond to impress those people you needed to impress so that you would get that thing you want, that raise, that whatever it is that you want. Well, but doesn't the kingdom tempt you enough? Inspire you enough? What's your dedication you're showing as far as the one offering you forever? There are places that close all the time for all kinds of reasons. I only closed for one reason today, then we reopened. That's because the building was going to have no power. And so we would have been all in darkness, and we don't have a generator on the building. And so I would have hated for everybody to drive all the way here only to have to go home because the power goes out. And this building doesn't stay warm very well when the power's out. Okay, my house lost power twice last night, and it maintained its heat pretty good because it wasn't off that long. But this building and this big, concrete block room, it's going to get cold quick. But there are people out there and leaders out there that don't understand the idea of commitment and dedication. Unless I can't physically be here, I'm going to be here. And when I'm not leading the teaching, I'm still here or somewhere else doing the work. Okay, I don't take days off from the job. Okay? I don't want you to clap for that. I want you to be inspired by that and say, when you don't show up, you're taking a day off. I showed up, you should be here. I show up on time, you should be here on time. I know a lot of people still don't seem to be able to get their life together to show up on time for things. And then it interrupts the flow of everything else. And you almost look at us like, well, why didn't you wait for us? Because you're late, that's why. Okay? And some of you are thinking, but Rabbi, you're late a lot. I'm not late to anything that I'm supposed to be at that needs me to be at. And if you ask my wife, she'll tell you, if it's something that I'm expected that I'm not leading, because if I'm leading it, I'm not late. It's waiting for me. But if you're waiting for me, I will be frustrated if I'm late. If I'm coming to your house because you invited me to your place or going to your meeting, I don't want to be late. I want to make sure we show up because we were committed to. It was a commitment. Are you making the commitments that are necessary? You know, on the spiritual vertical, the relationship requires what? Obedience and trust. Are you growing that light in you? Okay? You know, these areas of dedication these are ones that need to be examined regularly. I'm going to continue more with it, but I want to just make that point. You should be examining them regularly. They should be cleaned, maintained, and illuminated. Right? You clean them, you maintain them, and you bring light into them. We'll get more into the spiritual vertical when we get into some of the other verses here. What about the physical? Yahweh called you. You're supposed to end up in the kingdom, and you don't take care of your health at all? You don't care about what you put in your body. You don't care about how you maintain your body. You don't care about getting enough sleep. You don't care about whatever. What are you doing to take care of your physical body? To maintain health? I think that's an expectation. If I gave you, if you're my child, let's say, and I gave you a car, I'd want you to maintain the car. I want you to make sure it gets oil checked and changed on a regular basis and do the brakes and everything else. I want you to make sure it's inspected properly on a regular basis. I want you to clean it, right? There's an expectation you might have. Well, the Creator gave you, for better or worse, this, whatever this is. I don't care how damaged and broken and flawed it is, you have to maintain it the best you can. It's the one He gave you. So take care of it. What about financial? Okay, are you dedicated to understand? And this is still, again, mostly talking about from a vertical point of view. The vertical point of view has the tithes and offerings as part of the financial. That's an area of dedication. And if you're still struggling to tithe and offer, when are you going to commit to fix that? When are you going to be dedicated and committed to fix that? And some of you think, oh, now you're going to meddle. Listen, I didn't ask you to do this. He did. I didn't invite you into this. I didn't call you. I didn't pop your bubble. I didn't do anything. I'm here helping hopefully bring light in like you were trying to bring in. He called you. He popped your bubble. And so it's to Him you're dedicated and committed. Or not. Okay? But do you have it prepared and ready before you show up here on Saturday? Or if you're using, the donations, buttons and Subsplash and that kind of thing, do you take care of it as soon as your check comes? And just make sure that that's done. And if it's not done first, your dedication's a problem. You should be taking care of that first. Why? Because it's the highest priority is His stuff, isn't it? If you're dedicated, that is. Okay? If you're not, well then anything could be first. You're going to put a priority on whichever or whoever you're dedicated to, aren't you? And if you're mostly dedicated to you, your stuff comes first. If you're mostly dedicated to Him, His stuff comes first. What about in the area of chavarim, friends, community? Chavarim, the Hebrew. Are you committed to community? It's amazing how sometimes we have to beg people to help. There's like 200 plus people in this room. And yet, why do we even have to ask anybody to help? Why are you not looking? You know what? Does it take anybody to figure out that when we have a meal, that there's going to be cleaning needed? That if the meal involved the kitchen, that there's going to be kitchen stuff needed. If it involved food in here, there's going to be sweeping, mopping, whatever. And this is every week, so it's not even like if for some reason you just missed that thought, how did you miss the fact that we do this every week? And why are you not just getting up to go do it? We should be turning people away because we have too many. Because this is what family does, community does. But are you dedicated to because a lot of you came here because you wanted a community. Well, did you want to sit back with a baby bird open mouth and just be fed? Or did you come here to be a part of the community actively? What kind of commitment level do you have? All right? What about relationally? We're talking now, mishpacha, your family. That's with your closest people that are family to you, and specifically, literally, your family, the ones that are in the walk. Your wife, your husband, your children, your parents, if they're in the walk, the family members. Or maybe family because you're now family by choice as opposed to just friends, but you're now more than friends, you're family. Some of you see each other that way. But are you dedicated? Are you loyal? Do you have integrity towards all that? This is a big thing we're doing. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's the biggest thing you could do. Not just a big thing. It's the big thing. And it covers every aspect of your life. So, when they went to dedicate the temple, did they just randomly go to just scrub it down, or did they have an idea of what it needed to look like? In other words, there was expectations, right? They had expectations of what went where and what needed to be what and how it needed to look and how to. They also knew that certain things had to be dedicated a certain way with a certain ritual to wash, to cleanse, using, it could be using the ashes of a heifer. It could be using hyssop and whatever. There were different protocols for different items, right? They knew the expectation that was there for that temple to be ready to be used. So what are the expectations that we have on us as committed, dedicated, etc.? Well, we have behavioral expectations, don't we? The behavioral expectations are in the covenant. Exodus 19. All right, we could even turn there just to read that real quick. Because our relationship that we're dedicated to has a behavior component to it. Verse 3. Moshe went to Elohim, and Yahweh called to him from the mountain, saying, "This is what you are to say to the house of Jacob and declare to the children of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Mitzrites and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." I'm going to stop right there. Is there anybody in this room who has not seen what he did to the Mitzrites in your life and how he bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to himself? Anybody not seen that in their life? Oh, okay, then the next part of this then probably applies to you. He says, you have seen these things, and now if you dedicate yourself, commit yourself, diligently obey my voice, and guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set-apart nation. Those are the words you are to speak to the children of Israel. Okay, in verse 8, all that Yahweh said, this is what the people answered together. He said, all that Yahweh spoken, we shall do. They were dedicated. At least they said they were. See, but dedication is more than a statement. Commitment's more than just something in words. It's the actions that matter, right? So we have behavioral expectations. Those expectations are expounded in things like what? The 10 Commandments. He expects us to put him. He says, first of all, he expects us to know that he is Yahweh who brought them out of Mitzrayim. He's the one who brought you out of your Mitzrayim. We all have made these exoduses out of our own personal, wilderness journey out of Mitzrayim, out of our own Egypt, so to speak. Okay? And then he starts to help you understand the relationship, that you shouldn't put anything and think it's like him, making idols, and don't make his name useless. And then keep Shabbat, and then parents, and then not murdering, and not stealing, and not committing adultery, etc. So there are behavioral expectations. Are you dedicated and committed to keep those? To perform the behaviors that he's expecting of you? We have, of course, Leviticus 19:2, where he says, be set apart as I am set apart. That's an expectation he has. An expectation of who? Those who are dedicated and committed. So we've called it covenant before, but you know what? A lot of people say they make covenant, but then they don't keep it because they weren't dedicated. They weren't committed to it. This is the Feast of Dedication, Hanukkah. It's a celebration of being dedicated. And every night, we're lighting another candle to show more, be an example of more light coming into our lives every day. And that brightness getting brighter. We have relational expectations. He has with us in this idea of being dedicated. Relational expectations. What are those relational expectations? Go to Deuteronomy 6. All right, Deuteronomy 6. You should know this already. You know where we're going. We're going to cover the Shema and the Vahavta. Let's begin in verse 1. And this is the command, the laws and right rulings which Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you, to teach you to do in the land which you're passing over to possess, so that you fear Yahweh your Elohim. That's part of the relational. He wants you to fear him. Have overriding, meaning it's higher than anything else, overriding awe and reverence and respect for him above all things. To guard his laws and his commands which I command you, you and your son and your grandson all the days of your life, and that your days be prolonged. And you shall hear, O Israel, and shall guard to do that it might be well with you. That's part of the relational stuff. Are we committed to the stuff so that it will be well with us? Are we committed to stuff so that we get to have our days prolonged? The prolonging days metaphor is always an idiomatic phrase for the forever. It's not just saying instead of living to 60, you live to 80. Okay, he's not saying that. It's talking about the forever. He says, so it might be well with you and that you increase greatly as Yahweh, your Elohim of your fathers, has spoken to you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. In other words, so you'll be in a place that's abundant. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh is one. All right, verse 4. Hear, O Israel. Hear. In other words, receive. Yahweh is your Elohim, and Yahweh is Echad. What does it mean when he says Yahweh is Echad? Well, there's only one of him. Well, that's not what it says. That everything that is him is completely of one accord. Everything that is him is completely aligned. Because there is a Father and a Son, but the Son is Echad with the Father. He says this in John 17. He says, Father, I wish that they were Echad, as we are Echad, that they were one as we are one. In the same way, just in the same manner, to look exactly like how we are one, in that same way, I want them to be one. I don't know if they ever got there. I haven't seen too many people that have ever got there, where two people can really be one in full, aligned agreement. I don't know husbands and wives, best friends, anybody like that. It's hard because it takes trust and it takes submission. It just takes that. And we're very bad at that because it means you have to give over your sovereignty to do that. Not so much even your sovereignty. You have to give over your desires. But I don't like that. Well, I don't want to. Well, that's not fair. Well, how come I have to do that? But I want to do this, and I want that. And yes, I put that sort of whiny voice on purpose, because that's what it always sounds like. It sounds like a 3-year-old. I don't like that. I want this. All right. I don't hear Yeshua ever doing that. Anyway, continuing here. So he says in verse 5, this is the Vahavta. This is his relational expectation. Are you dedicated to this? He says, you shall, not you should, you shall. There's an if here, by the way. If you're going to do these other things, then you're going to do this. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. He says, you're going to know that I'm the Yahweh, your Elohim. You're going to go ahead and guard my commands. You're going to fear me. You're going to teach these things to your children, etc., etc. You're going to hear, receive. Remember what I told you about revelation? That something revealed is of no use unless you receive it and then act upon it. Revelation is nothing. It's information. He's saying, but I want you to hear. It's an active hearing, the Shema. Hear and do. It's hear and do something with what you're hearing. Hear and take action. Receive. You know, sometimes in a conversation with somebody, they'll say to you something like, all right, I hear what you're saying. I got it. I'm receiving that, right? You've heard people say that. This is what he's talking about. He's speaking. He wants you to respond to him with, I received that. Because almost always when someone says to me, I received that, it wasn't something they wanted to receive. Because that's where you have to be to use those words, in a place where you really didn't want to, but you received it anyway. And you took the correction, you go, all right, I received that. That's where the humility comes in. He says, and you shall, we just started the shall part, love Yahweh your Elohim. So this is a command. If you're covenanted, if you're committed, if you're dedicated, you are going to love him. Some of you struggle with that sometimes. Why would you struggle with that? Because your life situations have distracted you from who he is and who you are in your relationship with him. And you're allowing whatever you're going through right now to distract you from the realities of your relationship. Because no matter what in other words, we are still looking at situationally affected emotions. See, Yahweh loves you no matter what's happening. And you should love him no matter what's happening. Now, he may not like and approve what you're doing, but he's going to love you without situation significance. In other words, the situation does not affect that. And so you are to love him. Why? Because you're covenanted, and you're dedicated, and you're committed. So you're going to love him. How are you going to do this? With all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. Did you ever really think about what those three words? Okay, so you're going to love him with all your heart. That's easy. We all get that. My heart, my emotions, I'm going to love him with all my heart. With all your being. What does that mean? With all your being. I mean, from your deepest core, you're going to love him, not just from the heart. And that's going to be, and being is you being. So I'm going to love him in all that I do. Is my actions are going to show that love. In my being, I'm going to love him. I'm going to love him in my emotions, my heart, and I'm going to love him in my being. And then I have to do this in a certain way. It's going to take all my strength. I'm going to take all my strength. Because he wants you to do it with all your might. It's going to take effort. Because it's not always going to be easy to love him when you're going through the ringer. It's not going to be easy to love him, whatever situation you want to fill in the blank with. We all know those moments. Sometimes it's not easy to love him because you don't know why he could love you. And that happens to a lot of you. You're thinking, well, how could he love me? Well, I don't know how to love him because I can't figure out why he loves me. But he does. Not in that sort of Christianized, oh, God loves you. No, he loves you. But he loves you enough to chastise you, correct you, etc. Because that's what genuine love is. He's not the entitling, enabling love coming from him. That's not coming from him. Oh, I don't care what you do. I just love you anyway. Oh, no, he greatly cares about what you do. He just loves you anyway. Okay? But he'll love you even when he puts you in the fire, if that's where it comes to. He'll still love you, but you may end up in that lake. All right. I know that's hard to kind of fathom because you have to figure that means that he has to hate me to do that. No. If your child did something completely heinous and ended up in jail or something, you'd still love your child. It'd be hard maybe at times to do it, but you still love your child. Even if the child was absolutely guilty and sociopathic or whatever, you would still love the child. But you would also know that that child belongs where they are or whatever they deserve, what's going on. Doesn't mean that you don't love them anymore. All right? So are you committed enough? Are you dedicated enough to really stop just reciting the Shema and the Vahavta, but actually live this? You need to figure out for yourself, what does it look like to love him with everything? With your emotions, with your being, with your strength. And do you even feel that yet? And if you don't, you got to figure out why. What's holding you back? Why don't you love him like that? Well, if you truly understood that he pulled you out of Mitzrayim, if you truly understood that, look at where your life would be otherwise. I mean, seriously. If you've been doing this more than 3 or 4 or 5 years and you came out of some pretty ugly stuff, where would you be now without this? Or if you're going through some really awful stuff, how would you go through that awful stuff without him, with nothing? Look, I get why the world is mostly depressed and suicidal. Because you got nothing. You got nothing to hold on to. There's no hope. So what is there to hold on to? I mean, if all of this sucks, why would I want to stay here? Because I'm supposed to grow and learn here. There's a reason to be here in this mess. But if there's no reason, of course people want to quit, leave, numb themselves, drug themselves, whatever they do. Because they don't know anything else to look forward to. And they don't like now. So there's nothing to look forward to, and now is awful. I can't even imagine how people deal with that. You should be praising God every day that you don't have that problem. Because you imagine going through what you're going through without any hope of anything. And without anointed people to talk to and to counsel with and to get what you need to get, whatever that is. I don't know. So back to the Vahavta. He says, so not only does he want you to love him that way, but he wants you to impress these things on your children. By the way, impress them, let's change that around. It's not like pressing in, which is kind of what the Hebrew kind of means, like you would make into like a carving or something, you would be making an impression or a mark. What we're talking about, as we would understand, make an impression on somebody is your behavior makes an impression on them. It's not you forcing Yahweh and Torah into them, but they're watching you, who claim to be Yahweh and Torah, act like, well, you know what you're doing. And you act like you do, and you wonder why your children are not impressed. They're not seeing that Yeshua-like person you're supposed to be. They're not seeing that this whole walk has benefited you in any way. Then why would it benefit them? Seriously. So make an impression on your children. Don't try to push things into them. Lead, show, be that example. He says, and you shall speak of them, okay, these words that he's commanding, verse 6, I skipped over. These words which I command you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them. Okay, so what is he commanding us? The 10 Commandments and the rest of the Torah commandments, they shall be something that we, okay, have in our heart, and then we, because they're in our heart, we live them, and that makes an impression on others. Are you dedicated to that? Are you committed to that? I don't know. He says, I want you to speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise up. In other words, not that you're just sitting there talking scripture all day, but as life happens, you should be using scripture as your reference to what you should or shouldn't be doing in those life situations. So it's not like you're just walking around speaking Torah all day long, but something comes up, and when it comes up, you can talk about what the right thing to do is and what the wrong thing to do is because of what the Torah says. Or you speak about how you should get counsel, because that's Torah also. Because maybe it's something you need counsel for. And this is something that you're going to have always happening, right? It says when you're in your house, when you're not in your house. When you're sleeping, right? When you go to lay down and when you rise up. Doesn't matter where you are, what time of day it is, there should be this awareness, which is why he says it's frontlets before your eyes, awareness of these words and how they might apply in whatever you're going through at that moment. Those words. He says, and you're going to bind them as a sign in your hand, and they shall be frontlets between your eyes, and write them on the doorposts of your gates and on your house. In other words, it should be something that someone looks at you and say, you're different, right? We go back to being set apart, that teaching we've been doing, in a discernible and openly obvious way. There's something different about you. And it's not like, there's something different about that person. They're weird. No, it's different. Why do you have, you know what? You don't seem to be all that upset when everybody else is going nuts. You don't seem to be depressed when everybody else has anxiety coming out of every pore of their body. You don't seem to be, you understand what I'm saying? Where's that coming from? How come you're not going crazy like everybody? Because I have this relationship. See, of course, you claim you have that relationship and you're acting just as, flipped out as everybody else. Well, then, do you really have the relationship? Because if you did, why are you getting so flipped out? You know that we're going to go through cycles. You know that there's going to be good times and bad times until the end, whenever the end finally does come. It's still going to cycle through. And by the way, you see cycles on a much smaller scale in your own life. You have a good week, you have a bad week. You have a good day, you have a bad day. You have a good month, you have a bad, whatever it is. You see these cycles. And you always have a cycle. It doesn't stay in just one. So if you're having a good month, be prepared, the bad one's coming, so that you're not overwhelmed by it. If you're having a bad month, it's okay, the good one's coming. Whichever one you're in, either look forward to the good one coming if you're in the bad one, or prepare for the bad one if you're in the good one. Because they are going to happen on a repeated basis. And if you're dedicated and committed to this walk, you should also be dedicated to being prepared and not surprised. I think that you should get to a point where very little surprises you. Okay? Not much surprises me anymore. Now, people might surprise me a little because sometimes they just show me that they need more help than I thought. Okay? But life doesn't surprise me. The bigger sort of cycles. We learned about this in the Torah portion, right? With the Joseph telling him about you're going to have abundance and then you're going to have scarcity. Well, that's happened hundreds of times since Joseph. And it happened hundreds of times before Joseph. This time Joseph warned them in advance and said, look, you need to prepare for this. Well, guess what? We should be preparing as well. But are you dedicated to that? Every one of you has heard Elder and I teach you that you should have an emergency fund. I don't want you to put up your hands, but you need to own, if you don't have one, that you didn't listen. $1,000 minimum emergency fund. And if you can't figure out a way over a period of time to put away $1,000, you need a new job, a second job, a third job, something. Okay? Because until you have 10, Billy's not impressed anyway. Okay? But you know what? If you were dedicated and committed, you would. Some of you have been saying, well, I've been trying to get out of debt for all these years, but you weren't committed to it. Some of you said, I want to lose weight, but you haven't been committed to it. Some of you say, I want to do this, I want to do that, but you're not committed to it, so it doesn't happen. Well, you want to go into the kingdom. Are you committed to it? Are you dedicated to it? Because if you're not, it's not going to happen. Okay, I'm probably the only preacher out there that's not going to constantly tell you, don't worry about it, you're in. I will constantly tell you that you have absolutely the ability from where you are to get in, because he wouldn't have called you if you couldn't. But I'm not going to blow smoke up your skirt, so to speak, and just kind of make, lie to you and tickle your ears and tell you that you're all getting in. I would like to believe that you will, because I'd like to believe that you'll wake up and get dedicated and committed and do what you're supposed to do. Look, the greatest prize ever offered to anybody is what's being offered to you, which means it's going to take everything you've got. Okay? And it's going to take even stuff you don't even know you've got. It's going to take you digging in and finding resources and reserves that you don't even know you've got. Because you're going to get to the place where I can't do this. Anybody been to that place? I can't do this? But you can. And you have to dig. Okay? You have to dig in and find whatever that is that you didn't even know was there. But you know it's there because he's told you no trial has come upon you that's outside your ability. That's beyond your finding that strength that you need. You believe him or you don't. If you're covenanted, if you claim to be a believer, then you believe him. You have faith, you believe him. Which means that I don't care what you're going through. There has to be that voice in your head saying, whatever I'm dealing with right now, I've got the reserve somewhere, even if I have no idea where it is, that I have to reach for, dig for, search for, but it's there. Okay? Just know that it's there. But you have to be dedicated to this walk, which means that you're dedicated to his words, and his words tell you, you can do this. But his words also tell you it's you that has to do it. You have to overcome 2,000 years of brainwashing that it was done for you. Nothing you, I'll say this, I've said this many times, nothing that you need to do was done for you. Nothing that you need to do will ever be done for you. This is because you need to do it. The things you can't do, he'll do for you. They will be done by somebody else or by him. He'll provide what you can't do. But if it's something you need to do, that he needs you to learn that you can do it, that development and growth that comes from you doing it, you need to do it. He is not going to undermine the value of that. See, a lot of you have wrecked your children because you've let them rely on you to do things they should be doing. And you've done for them things they should be doing. I get parents coming to me all the time. Well, my kid won't do his homework. Good, let him fail. What do you care? Because somehow it's your pride thinking it reflects on you. I told my children when they struggled in high school, when they first started I said, I already graduated. I said, you need to figure this out. Well, I'd had all that. Nobody helped me. Figure it out. That's part of what school's about, is learning how to figure things out. Figure it out. But see, you'll do for your children. How many of your children can't do laundry, can't cook their own food, can't do this, can't? Because you don't make them do anything. Well, that child's room is always a mess. So what? Let him live in a mess. Why do you care? What do you care? I told my children I didn't care as long as it wasn't in my way. If I have to walk in your room to do something, there better be a path I can walk. Because otherwise anything that's in my way to step on, I'm just throwing it out. Okay, you want to live in a pigsty? That's your problem. You want your clean clothes to be mixed in with your dirty clothes? You don't know what's what? That's your problem. It's not my problem.
It stinks.
Yeah, it does stink. She said, it stinks. Yeah, well, that's their problem. At some point, they'll have friends to tell them, you stink. Oh, yeah, they'll get to a point where they're too young for that. They get older friends. Their friends will tell them when they stink. All right? Trust me. Okay, they're not even in the teens yet. They're not going to have that. They get to be teenagers. They'll be starting to tell each other they stink. All right? Somebody walk in the room and be like, oh, my gosh, I think I lost an eyebrow. Man, you stink. You know? But we're messing this whole thing up. We're more dedicated to wrecking their lives by thinking we're helping them than fixing our own lives and doing what we need to do. Yeah. I can't tell you how much damage is done by people thinking they're helping. I'm not saying you shouldn't help. You should be making sure that what you're doing is actually helpful. All right? And doing for others what they should be doing for themselves is not helpful. And Yahweh will not do that for you either. Well, I don't understand why. Because you're supposed to do this yourself. That's why. When he is not answering you, sometimes it's because you're supposed to do it yourself. By yourself, that doesn't mean without help, without counsel, whatever, but you're supposed to figure it out, not have it magically just taken away from you. Some of you have lifestyles and addictions and habits and whatever it is that you've had your whole life that you just want magically taken away. Well, that would be so easy and have zero value. The value of you kicking that habit, you breaking that addiction, you changing those choices, there's value, there's growth, there's maturity there. Think about it. But it's going to be painful and awful, and yes, it is. But you'll be so proud of yourself, and others will be proud of you because you did it. Oh, but I'm supposed to rely on... Yes, you do rely on Yahweh for things. He'll give you strength for you to do it. You just have to be doing it. Look, when my little girl was 4 years old and wanted to walk across like the little balance beam thing they have in the park, it's only like 2 inches off the ground, whatever, but it's basically a piece of wood they could walk on. I told her I would hold her hand so she could walk it. I wasn't going to pick her up and carry her across it. She wanted to walk it. Now, bear in mind, I held her hand and we didn't do anything until she walked over and stepped on it. She had to walk over and step on the piece of wood. I didn't drag her over there and do it all for her. I said, I will hold your hand if that's what you want to do. You go over there and I will hold your hand. She had to go over to go on the wood, and then I reached out and I said, here. And then I basically just left my hand out so she could hold my hand. I didn't even really hold, and then because I knew she could do it. Okay, and also I knew that if she fell, it was only 2 inches. Okay? The thing was sitting on the floor. It was just a block of wood tilted sideways, not much. But to a little kid, that looks like, But we are dealing with stuff like that we think is such a big deal when it really isn't. If you would just know that Abba's there to hold your hand if you need it, but you're walking across the board. You're going to take your foot, put it on, and start putting one in front of the other, and he'll stand there, and you can hold his hand. Because I just put my hand out for her to grab onto if she needed balance. I didn't hold her. She could hold me. She could reach out for support from me. You reach out to the Father for support. But you have to do this stuff. The Maccabees had to clean out the temple. It didn't clean itself. It didn't magically just go whoosh and everything was clean. You have to clean out your temple. If you're dedicated, you'll make the effort and you'll clean out your temple. Okay? In Leviticus 19:18, that's where it says you shall love your neighbor as yourself. We know the 2 great commands in Matthew, right? Loving Yahweh, loving neighbor. These are expectations that dedication is required for. You can't do these things without dedication. You can't really love him or love each other unless you're dedicated to figuring out how to do that. Because it's not, you would think it'd be so easy to do. Well, loving God, how hard could that be? It's not easy. How do you love something you can't see? You know they're there, but you can't see them. You can't hug them. You can't hold his hand. There's no physical thing to grab a hold of. That's hard to do. It's hard enough to love one that you can grab a hold of. But how are you going to? And so it's not so easy. Oh, but I just love him so much. Well, right now at this moment, but what about all the other moments? What about when life's a little tough and he's not seeming to answer you because he's sitting back going, all right, you can do this. I'm watching. Don't worry. I'm paying attention, but you got this. But you don't hear anything. He's just standing there watching. Parents do that sometimes. They're standing just around the corner watching their kid do something, and the parents going, they're struggling, and some of you will run in there and helicopter in and just try to fix. No, stand back. They'll get it. They'll struggle. Let them figure it out. Let them figure it out. Look, I learned that lesson with my son when he used to do the Lego things, and he would come to me to get some help, and I would be busy, and I'd say, I'll come to you in a minute. He figured it out. Got to the point where he'd ask me, and I'd just ignore him. Because I knew he'd figure it out. I didn't ignore him that way. I'd say, go, I'm sure you can figure it out. If you need my help, come back and get me again. And he just got good at figuring it out. He could just follow. He learned how to read directions in a little book and put the things together. I don't know that would have happened if I constantly went in there and did it for him. Okay? Now, I never did it in a way where he just felt like I was being neglectful and I just didn't care about him. I said, if you really need help, I'll come and get me, but I'm in the middle of something right now, whatever, but I think you can do it. And I would tell him, go ahead, you can do it. And he would. Thing is, your father's not saying those words in your head. He's just watching, knowing that you can do it. Do you believe that, though? Are you committed to walking believing that? Are you dedicated to walking knowing that that's happening even though you can't see it? You might not feel it. You certainly don't hear it. But it's going to take a level of dedication and commitment. I'm going to walk this out knowing that he's there doing this even though I really don't know. But I do know. In other words, I don't know, like I don't have physical, tangible knowing, but I have a deeper knowing. You understand what I meant by that? So I'm not saying, well, I know, but I don't know. I know, I believe in the unseen. I don't have a physical evidence of it knowing. Because remember, belief is the evidence of things you can't see. And we claim Don't tell me you're a believer and you can't do this stuff. Okay? That's the definition of saying I'm a believer, is believing in the unseen when you can't see it, but you believe it anyway. Well, I'm not seeing any evidence right now, then you need to believe. That's when it comes in. Let's go to a couple of things, if I can do this quickly here. Ephesians 4. I know we've been in there many times. I'm going to read a couple of verses in the beginning of the chapter. I call upon you, verse 1, therefore I, the prisoner of the master, to walk worthily of the calling with which you were called. In other words, be committed. Do this with dedication. Walk in a worthy manner of the calling. You're called to be a dedicated person to him. Remember, dedicated is devoted to, single-minded, all your might, all your meaning, all. That sounds like single-minded to me, okay? Loyalty and integrity, exclusively allocated for that purpose. He says, walk in a worthy manner of that. Walk in the calling to which you were called, with all humility and meekness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, being eager to guard the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. It's really the spirit of unity and the bond of peace. They have it kind of weird there. One body, one spirit, as you also were called in one expectation of your calling. There was one expectation, that you do these things and you become him. That's the overriding expectation. Okay? Let's look at 2 Peter 1. And we'll begin in verse 1. Shimon Kifa, a servant and emissary of Yeshua Messiah, to those who have obtained a belief as precious as ours. Your belief is precious if you actually have belief. Not believing Yeshua exists or existed or died, but the full belief, which includes all of what I just said and everything else that he's shown us and he has in his word. I mean, do you believe him when he says that no trial has come upon you? That is not just, it's not uncommon to man. It's normal that men run into these things, and I will never allow you to go through something that you don't have a way of escape and that's beyond what you can withstand and blah, 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 right? Do you believe it or not? All right. He says, a belief as precious as ours by the righteousness of Elohim and Savior Messiah. Favor, peace be increased to you in the knowledge of Elohim and of Yeshua our Master, as his mighty like power has given to us all we need for life and reverence, through the knowledge of him who called us to esteem and uprightness. So he's saying is, the mighty like power he has given us. How did he give that to us? Through his Ruach, through believing in him, through his word, through the commandments. These are all things that empower us. It says we have these things, all we need for life and reverence, through the knowledge, relationship of him who called us. We have a relationship through him as the light, as the Torah, as the way, as life, as all those things, as the truth. He called us to esteem and uprightness. Through these, there have been given to us exceedingly great and precious promises, so that through these you might be partakers of the mighty like nature. So we've been given promises that through these, what these? Back to the knowledge of him, we might be partakers of the mighty like nature, having escaped from the corruption in the world caused by lust. Look, maybe we need to do a teaching on lust. What is lust anyway? It's your emotional craving and desires. And that corrupts more easily than anything else, which is the point he's making here. You're corrupted by your desires. Desire is probably one of the most, if not the most potent, powerful things that you could have going in you. It could be for good or bad. You're to desire him, and you desire his kingdom above all, you'll be great, because you will go and do the things necessary to get what you desire. The desire is the great drive behind what you do. It's a driver. If you don't want it bad enough, you're not going to do it, whatever it is. Problem is that uncontrolled, unshackled desire corrupts everything. This is what he's trying to tell you here. But through all of this, having escaped from the corruption in the world caused by lust, that worldly, earthly, fleshly stuff is all based on I want or I don't want. And it's an emotionally driven thing. And for this reason, do your utmost, right? Do your utmost to add. So he starts off with this belief, and now you got to add on top of that. Because he started off with the belief in verse 1. Do your utmost to add to your belief uprightness. To uprightness, knowledge. To knowledge, self-control. To self-control, endurance. And to endurance, reverence. To reverence, brotherly affection. And to brotherly affection, love. Give me 1 second here. You almost have the items that you would have for, like, if you were lighting the candles of the menorah. You have belief. Then you have uprightness. Then you have knowledge. Then you have self-control. Then you have endurance. Then you have reverence. Okay, brotherly affection. And then love.
Wow.
We might want to use that next year when we do this. Think about these things as you're lighting each candle. Day 1, belief. Day 2, uprightness. Day 3, knowledge and self-control. It just hit me while I was reading it. All of a sudden, I said, "What's there's 8 of them? How beautiful." Okay? He says, "For if these are in you and increase, they cause you to be neither inactive nor without fruit in the knowledge of our Master Yeshua." If these are in you and increase, we talked about adding more light. Now let's understand what this is. So you start off with belief, and we add uprightness to it. So what is uprightness to it? It means that you have that integrity and strength to stick to your beliefs, whatever those are, right? And then you're going to add to that knowledge. So that's where you're going to have a relationship with the information that you have, so that your belief, which has given you a certain level of integrity, and you're going to stand behind what you believe, now you're going to, through doing, we relationally develop that knowledge. Now with the knowledge, we're then going to realize that that emotion called desire is still around that can corrupt. We need self-control. Because even the good stuff can take you in an imbalanced way out of control. And then he says to self-control, this is going to be a marathon. You better add endurance to it. Because this isn't going to happen like this week. This is a lifelong endeavor. And then self-control and endurance, you're going to add reverence, where you're going to make sure that you now add on top of that awe and reverence for the process and for the reason you're doing the process, and who is the end result of all this. Who are you focused on? With reverence. And then while you're doing all of that, he expects you in that vertical way now to do this also, sharing it in the horizontal with brotherly affection and love. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful picture there. All right, now, these are all our expectations relationally from the above. Now, we are to examine ourselves. Okay, we have in 2 Corinthians 13 and verse 5, it says, "Examine yourselves whether you are in the belief. Prove yourselves." Okay, let's just look at that real quickly here. Probably going to end with this. 2 Corinthians 13, 5. "Examine yourselves whether you are in the belief. Prove yourselves. Or do you not know yourselves that Yeshua Messiah is in you unless you are disapproved?" Okay, let me go through what those words mean in the Greek, okay? So he says, examine yourselves whether you're in belief, prove yourselves. So prove yourselves means to test, to analyze, to discern. In other words, you are supposed to do what I've been talking about for the last couple of years, increase your self-awareness. Examine yourself. Test, analyze, discern, observe. Pay attention to you, what you're doing, why you're doing it, what's motivating you, whether it's working or not, whether it's bearing good fruit or not, etc. Pay attention. Okay, then it says, unless you are disapproved. The Greek there has the understanding of failed to pass the test. Unless you failed to pass the test. Unless you are found to be counterfeit. That's actually one of the meanings for that Greek word, found to be counterfeit. He says, examine yourself lest you find out you're counterfeit, you're a phony. Also, it means unless you are worthless. So that word, when it says disapproved, it's kind of a weird sentence, right? Prove yourself to see if you're approved, and then, of course, unless you're disapproved. Well, what in the world does that mean? He says that that Yeshua Messiah is in you unless you are, well, unless you what? Unless you fail the test. Unless you fail to pass the test, unless you're found to be counterfeit, unless you are worthless, of no value to him. If you're going to just keep doing whatever you want to do and not do what he tells you to do, that's of no value to him. That includes loving him and loving each other and all the rest of it. So we are to examine. He says, examine yourself. See, again, this sounds very much like you have to do a lot yourself and that he's not doing it for you. You have to examine yourself. You have to discern. You have to pay attention. You have to identify what's going on in you and fix it. Otherwise, you will, and he also gives you this word in the Greek that has to do with, by the way, you're taking a test. And you're going to be in the right place. It says here that Yeshua Messiah will be in you unless you fail the test. Unless you're worthless. Unless you're found to be a counterfeit. See, some of you struggle and you feel like you're being phony. Are you? Or are you just feeling that way? Is the worldly part of you trying to convince you you're a phony? Well, convince that part of you that you're not a phony. You grab a hold of you and say, no, that you're the phony. The part that believes this and is on this walk is the real. Don't call me a counterfeit. Don't call me a phony. Don't let yourself do that to yourself. Okay? All right, let's just see. I think that'd probably be perfect right there. Man, I had so much more, but I think we'll just end it with this. I don't know that we'll even do a second part. I think this was good enough. I think we made the point we wanted to make for today. I might extend this next year if I have more time. But I want you to get this, okay? Hanukkah is celebrating dedication, okay? The metaphor of dedicating the temple, yes, the literal of dedicating the temple at that time, but that you are the temple. And I think we should be looking at what it means to be rededicating ourselves. Amen? Amen. Father, we come before you, and Father, we just want to dedicate ourselves and renew our dedication to you. That, Father, that we would be devoted to that single purpose of transforming into you. That we be single-minded in our loyalty and our integrity. That we'd exclusively allocate all of our love, being, might, towards you for the intended purpose of serving you and becoming you. So, Father, we want to thank you for your words. I want to thank you for this feast that was inspired in your children to do. It was not commanded by you, but it was inspired, and I think that we can take so much from it. So let us continue to increase the light in this temple, our human temple, our bodies, as we grow in the knowledge and the relationship with Yeshua, our Messiah. So, Father, we want to thank you. Thank you for strengthening us. Thank you for holding our hand. Thank you for being there so we can hold on to you when we're afraid and we need to be steadied. And thank you for not doing what we need to do. Thank you for never doing what we must do ourselves. So that we always do, so there's no missing out on the growth that we should have. So, Father, we thank you for all these things and give you all glory and honor. In the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen.